In this episode, we're going to continue our look into documentation-driven development on a real SaaS platform project. This is for a funded startup in the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing space. We've designed the system and we've started implementing it. In our last episode, which was the second in the series, we looked at how to create requirements. In the first episode, we looked at the fundamentals of documentation-driven development. This episode, we're going to dive straight into creating our first feature. Just to give you a quick background, this is the process we're using, the documentation-driven development. I've also seen people calling it spec-driven design recently, or spec-driven development, something like that. And the basic concept is that you create a documentation foundation that will feed your agent, that tells it what to build and how to build it. You generate code, you verify the code, you might write automated tests to do that part. You could refactor the code, potentially with the help of the agent. Then you take lessons learned and you push them back into your documentation foundation, and then you repeat the process. In the first episode, I talked about the setup where we're having a $20 a month engineer. It's more like $100 a month now. If you're using Claude or any of the better tools. And what I was saying is that you should think about it like a temp employee, where they can write fast, they can code fast, they know the full history of the internet, they can research, you can use the command line, they can test code. But we have to keep in balance the fact that they hallucinate, and the more questions we ask them, the more mistakes they'll make, and they're non-deterministic. And so what I had said is that we want to set ourselves a reasonable goal, which is to go 2 times faster with higher quality. And that if we do this mindset shift where we start thinking about our AI agent as an employee, you think about an agent, you bring them in, you have to onboard them. When they start hallucinating, we're going to send that person home for the day or fire them, however you want to think about it. And then we'll put a new person in their spot by creating a new session. And that means we have to be able to onboard them quickly. And you usually have your processes and all that documented. So it's the same thing with working with these agents as you would with a real person. And what I pointed out is there's 3 core skills we're going to be looking at, which is context management, accelerating validation. Telling them what to build and how to build it is context management, what to build, how to build it, how to know when you're done. Accelerating validation. If we review every single thing they do, we're not going to get ROI out of it. We won't hit our 2x goal. So we need to learn how to be clever and fast and efficient at reviewing. And then we're going to let the agents know what we want them to do by evolving our processes. So our processes are documented in our documentation that we give to the agents, and we will continue to evolve those. So that's the setup. We're using MakerKit, and this is the application running. So when MakerKit, you get a starting page. MakerKit is a SaaS boilerplate that I like, that saves you a lot of time. It's batteries included on a whole ton of features that you need for multi-tenant SaaS. And what you can do is we're already logged in here. Once we're logged in, we can go in and we can see we have the multi-tenant. So we have our user level, and then we also have the company level. And when you come in here, there's just some basic things with profile and all that. There's a profile, there's the billing on the user level. And then if we come to our team level, so this would be like projects, there's a number of things. So it's just a good starting point for multi-tenant SaaS. And what we're going to do is take this app that's running on localhost, and we want to implement our first feature, which we started to scope out in the last episode of this session. So what we did in the last session is we created our docs folder. And within there, we created a best practices. A best practice has documentation for how we create user stories. And then it also has documentation for how the agent should work these user stories. We then came in and we created our first user story. We also added a lot of the assets from our design discovery. So these are transcripts from the calls. And we also added the Figma designs, which are the user flow diagrams and things like that for the app. And so there's our best practices. I've also, since the last episode, I downloaded the MakerKit documentation. They have a repo for that, and the repo actually supports exporting the documentation. So this is super helpful because we have the same version of the documentation for the app we're using. So let's say a year from now or something, we're behind on our upgrades and we need to do something. We've got parity between the documentation and what version we're using. Also, it's just going to be faster to have it just look in here for the documentation. We could index the documentation, things like that. So those are the things I've done to get prepared for this. And then we've created our first epic on the last episode. And since then, I've come back in and I've refactored the epic a little bit. What I found is we were talking about doing a health check endpoint, and it turns out that MakerKit already comes with a health endpoint. So the original plan was we were going to have an API health endpoint and a health page. I always do this as the first feature on a project if it's not there, because it's just something that's really easy to create that allows you to touch everything full stack and just really figure out what does our architecture look like, what does our dev workflow look like. But what we've discovered when reviewing the documentation and everything is that we're going to update the approach. So we're still going to have a health page, but it's going to use both the health check endpoint, which is built into MakerKit, and then also the /version endpoint that is built into MakerKit. And then we're going to create a page that displays both of those in a nice looking way. And that'll just be a way for us to get our first feature done and make sure that our documentation and all that is working the way we want it to work when we're using these doc-driven approaches. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So what I'm going to do is open up Claude Code now, and then I'll take it more full screenish. And we'll clear the context. And you can use any agent. I think Claude Code, I don't try them all the time, but at the time of this video, it's my favorite one. The agent just works better than the other ones I've tried recently. And so what I'm going to do, following these best practices, I want to implement, and then we'll say what the feature is. So we're going to just look for Epic because there's only one of those so far. That's why I like having Epic in the file name. Let's see, review and let's get started. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to review our best practices here for AI agent task workflow. So this is telling it the core process to follow is get the next task, ask clarifying questions, code the task, request review and verification once you think the coding is done, update the task status. So that means you would come into the, if you look in the Epic, we have a list of tasks here. So it would update the task status, meaning adding a checkbox or what, you can kind of do whatever you want for your process. And I lost my document. So it would update the task status, stage and commit changes, and then in session, and I mark that as critical, which means that after every task, we want to reset our context. And so I'm telling it that when you get done, give me a continuation prompt, because we're going to shut down our agent. Like I said, the hallucination rate goes up the more stuff you ask it to do. So as soon as we can, we're going to shut it down and then start the next task. But we're asking it to give us if we're not done, give us a prompt that we can just give to the agent when it's done. And then there's some other things in here. I've actually been using the agent to help me create these best practices. And that's where, when we were looking at our setup, where the evolving process part comes in, right? So as you're working, you should be going, oh, why is it not getting that part? Or, ooh, you should really do this after that. And then you just keep coming in and updating your SOPs, your standard operating procedure type best practices to update the workflow. So let's see what Claude is wanting to do. Okay, that's really narrow. Let's see. Perfect. I have a complete story details now, a much clearer picture, a task. I'll review discrepancy between epic and story. Question, should I keep it simple, implement exactly as the story describes? Walking skeleton approach. Okay. So there's a difference between the two, because when I had it update the requirements, I didn't get it to update the task as well. We'll just tell it use the epic as the source of truth. Okay, it looks like it's ready to start coding. So let's see what it's doing first here. It is coming into our health check and renaming the param from is DB healthy to DB health. I don't know if that's a really useful update. Do we need to change that? And so you got to get used to the fact that they're going to make a lot of unnecessary changes. Okay, so now what is it doing? It's coming in. It's updating the get Supabase health check. Do our requirements say to return the full config? It's trying to return the full config. At one time we were brainstorming to do that, but we moved away from that, so it shouldn't be doing that. You're right to question. Let me reread the Epic's definition of done. Okay. Better approach. Keith help check as okay. Docs should say to return the health check and version information in a new health page. Is that not what they say? Okay, so it says, I'm correct. I was overthinking the actual config data mentioned in Epics just means we're providing endpoints. Okay, so it was just getting confused. Hopefully it understands the requirements now. So it's creating a new directory. Okay, here is our health page. Okay, now it's creating some components for the health page. Okay, it's running to run the type check now. I think that means that the page might be ready. Let's take a look. This is wrong. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we've got our version and the database is connected and we've got a nice looking health check page. So it's running the linter. Okay, it's finding some lint errors and fixing them. The linter, just so you know, that's either coming in because of the Claude MD file. It's running the linter again. Or because you're probably wondering, like, how does it know to do that? So there's two ways. MakerKit comes with batteries included for AI development. So there's a Claude MD file here. If we look at that guy, it's probably going to cover linting, monorepo structure, essential commands, database operations, TypeScript. Let's see. Yeah, see down here, verification steps. After implementation, run type check. So that's part of the Claude MD. If you're not familiar with Claude MD, that's going to make Claude give instructions for Claude. So that's what's causing this to run. They're also using this feature of Claude here called agents. These are pretty cool. So the code quality agent, you give it a description. I believe it uses the description to understand when to fire this best practice. So use this agent when you need to review recently written or modified code for quality. So we'll probably see the agent running in a minute. So now it's checking it using curl. And that gets back to my point earlier about all the capabilities of these agents. So see how over here I mentioned contest and command line. So run things from the command line. That's what I mean by testing. It's clever enough to use curl, which is a command line utility, to call the app and just check to see what's the HTML that comes back. Okay, yeah, that looks good. So they're super powerful, these agents. So it's checking the version. Let's take a look at that for ourselves. So we should have the health. We should have version, which should call the API. And then we should also have health check. And so these endpoints are super helpful for like when you're deploying your app to a cloud provider. You know, if you're using Docker, Kubernetes, whatever, they all have usually health check capabilities where you can return, have an endpoint that returns 200 or not based on if the app is in a healthy state. And so I like adding the page that we were looking at so that your users and developers can kind of get an idea and see how it showed it was loading. I mean, this is a great looking page. If I try to make this page, it would not be as cool as that. Like if you look, it has the animations. And I mean, at this point, nobody is probably as impressed by the fact that agents can do this, but it's great. Okay, so we've got some kind of, let me refresh the browser and see if this is reproducible. Okay, and so where was I at? I was at health check because there was some error there. We could ask it to look at that error if it happens again. It might have been because the app was still building or something. It doesn't look like we can reproduce that, so I'll leave that alone. Okay, so at this point, we've implemented our feature. So now, if you look at our process, docs, best practices, AI agent task workflow, they should ask clarifying questions, code the task, request, review, and verification. So that's what we should see now. Excellent. The implementation is complete. Now I need to request your verification before making tasks as complete. I'm sorry, marking. So again, this is us evolving our processes and doing context management. So the agent is following our instructions, which we created in the last video in the series. So ready for review. So it's telling me how to test it. Go to the endpoints, all the stuff. So I'll just say verified. So now we should expect that it's going to update the status. So it wants to stage the health check. Let me check. Okay, it's staged. It didn't stage our I'm going to add our documentation updates to the stage too, so they'll get committed as well. Okay, it's wanting to commit now. So let's see. Aren't we supposed to update our docs first? You're absolutely right. I should. So this is where a lot of people kind of just give up and say, "Oh, this thing it never does what I tell it to." This is true. But what are we trying to accomplish? Our goal 2x faster, higher quality. Are we accomplishing that here? If you've ever seen my UIs, higher quality is definitely a big check. And 2x faster, I would say, yeah, too, if I try to create something that looks this cool. So, yeah, we had to remind it about a few things. So it's updated the process now. Let's see if it keeps going. So we should expect it to stage and commit changes. The commit messages are one of my favorite things about doing this workflow. They do wonderful commit messages, lots of details, which is really great. When you're using the agents, you can just say, hey, when did this get done or what happened? And it'll be able to review all that for you and figure it out because there's so much information in the commit messages. So we'll commit that. So now it should end the session and provide us a prompt for continuing. Let's see if it does it. There we go. So it's saying, perfect. Now let me provide session complete summary, completed public status, blah, blah, blah. What we accomplished, we already know. It's being a little verbose. Next task is infrastructure walking skeleton environment config story. Configuring environment variables for dev and prod. Walking skeleton is now functional, improves the complete stack integration. So the continuation prompt, continue the flow. Okay, so I'm going to copy the continuation prompt. And then what I'm going to do is do a clear. That will clear our context. And I'll just paste this in. It should reference our epic. Continue MEP flow following infrastructure walking skeleton epic plan at here. Review completed project, blah, blah, blah. Let's make sure the epic refers to the best practices. It doesn't. So what I'm going to do, just because we're trying to learn here, I'm going to get rid of this text. It should reference the best practices. So I'm going to exit out of Claude. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, I must hit the wrong command. And then I'm going to take Claude and resume my last session, which is one of the wonderful features of Claude. Nope, oh, I did the wrong one. Okay, and see, I'm going to use WhisperFlow. If you haven't seen WhisperFlow, I highly recommend it. It allows you to talk to the agents. So I'm going to be talking to the agent now. This looks good for our continuation prompt, but the continuation prompt should reference the AI agent task workflow best practices document. If that isn't in our process to add a link to that document, let's go ahead and update our process document to include that. If we update our process document, let's go ahead and commit those changes. Amend, commit them to our previous commit before we continue on. So this is a great example of evolving processes. So what I'm doing here is letting it know, hey, this is good, but really we need to let the agent know where our best practices live. And I don't want to have to type that in every time. What I want you to do is update the AI agent task workflow best practices document to include the instructions when you create a continuation prompt, that continuation prompt also contains a link to the AI agent task workflow.md document. Notice how WhisperFlow gets the file name correct. I didn't put the dashes, but it did the @ signal and did the whole thing. It's a really cool tool, and it'll take your babble and convert it into meaningful, readable stuff. So now what we're seeing is that it is updating here to say 8, provide continuation prompt, handoff referencing both the Epic documents and this workflow document. Okay. So it's adding our changes to the documentation. I had asked it to do a commit, amend commit, which would just put it on the previous commit, if you're not familiar with that. And it's doing it. Here's our amend commit. So that's great. And so now everything is committed. Hopefully it'll pick up and do the continuation prompt again, but we might end up having to ask it. We'll see when it gets done canoodling. All right, it did it. Very cool. So now we've got our continuation prompt here that says, continue this epic and follow these best practices. Boom, that's exactly what we want. So we'll copy that. We'll exit out. We'll start a new session. Okay, I'll paste in my prompt. And now we should be able to continue along with our epic. And we have a clean context. So what we've done is we've fired our agent and hired a new one. And we're onboarding them right now by giving them our best practices document that was specified up here. So we're telling them, hey, I want you to continue the work that's in this directory using these best practices. And so let's see if it figures it out. Okay, perfect. I can see the previous task was completed and committed. Now let me examine the environment configuration story and understand what needs to be done. So just so we have some context on what it's doing, if we look at our actual epic, we have the epic here, which is this, no, sorry, here's the epic. You end those in the prefix, and then all these other things are tasks within the epic. So if we actually look at our epic, you'll see that we've completed one of our tasks, and it's been updated by the agent. So we completed the health check status page, and now we're working on the environment config story. And if we click that, we can come and see what the environment config story, which is saying that I want environment variables properly configured for dead and prob so that the application can connect to the appropriate service in each environment. And so the first thing that it's trying to do is look for .env files and start the work. So I'm not going to go into that on this episode. I think we can kind of wrap it up close to here. The basic concept I wanted to demonstrate was just implementing a simple feature. I absolutely think we crushed our goal of text speed with higher quality, especially considering that I had to research. I've used MakerKit, but it changes and I didn't know everything about it. And just trying to read through all the documentation and figure out like, how does it manage versions? How does it manage, does it already have a health check endpoint? All that stuff would have taken a lot of time to do, right? But I have the documentation in here and I was just able to ask the Claude agent to go and do that stuff for me and review it. So we came up with a good plan. And then when we implemented it, we were able to do it really quickly, in my opinion, and end up with a page that looks great and is dynamic. And so I think we're in a really good position there. So in the next episode, we'll jump into some beefier features. I'm probably going to go ahead and do the rest of this walking skeleton, not as an episode, because that's going to get into some infrastructure and creating accounts and stuff that's a little out of the environment and stuff like that. But what I'll do in the next episode is we'll jump into a more beefy feature where we can see the approach expanded a little bit, but then also look at this part of the equation here, where we start refactoring and start driving our architecture to best practices and consistency. Because that's one of the things I hear people complain about a lot, is that the agents write crap code or bad code or whatever. And so in the next episode, we're going to do a beefier feature, and we'll see how we can create great code quality that is consistent across features. And then in future episodes after that, we'll start looking at bringing in some testing and things like that, and how we can have the agents be more autonomous, because we can start using some of the Agile manifesto kind of techniques like test-driven development. Well, thank you for joining. I'll see you in the next episode.